So we're still in our inspector window for our launch origin. So you want to go down to Mesh Renderer and uncheck this box. And what this does is simply hides your launch origin because we don't really want to see where we're launching the balls from. Once you've done that, you can go on to do the camera setup. So we're taking our main camera, we're dragging it onto our launch origin to make it a child of the launch origin. And then we're giving the main camera the following settings. X is -10, Y is -7, Z is -3. Our rotation is -65, 14, and -13. All right, so now we're going to create our ball prefab. So go back to Game Object, 3D Object, create a sphere, rename that to ball, set position and rotation on all axes to 0, and add a rigid body component by hitting Add Component, Physics, Rigid Body. And then we're locating in the Materials folder for our assets the purple color. And then we're just dragging that into our ball in order to color our ball purple. We already created the ball physic material, so what we're going to do is simply add that to add that to our ball. So I'm selecting bounce, dragging that in here, and that will go into my sphere collider material there. You can see bounce has been added there. So now that our ball is finished, what we can do is go back to Assets, Prefabs. Oops, sorry, where's my ball? There it is. Assets, Prefabs, and then we're dragging our ball into our prefabs here to create ourselves our nice little ball. What this means when it's in the prefabs folder in the assets is that we can endlessly duplicate this and we can make settings for the ball so that if, for example, I were to add another ball by dragging in my prefab, each of these balls would be controlled by the prefab. So any settings in the prefab that I made to the ball would also be applied to all balls that are in the scene. Right now, I don't need to do that. So I'm just going to delete this one again. So now I have created a prefab, which means that I no longer have to have this ball in my hierarchy window. So I can delete that ball. Now go back into your launch origin script. Locate the, let's see. Yeah, and then we're going to go to, when we have our launch origin selected, we're going to go into Add Component, Script, and then we're going to select the Launch Projectile script. And you can see now that that's been added to my launch origin inspector window. Now we need to set our projectile that you see here under launch projectile to be our ball. So I'm going to go back to assets and then I'm going to select ball. And now you can see ball has been added as my launch projectile. So this is why that we were able to delete the ball from the hierarchy, because this launch projectile script generates balls every time you start to play. And so when you set projectile to ball, it will endlessly produce balls for you. You can adjust later this launch velocity to be less or more depending on what you want. For right now, leave it at 700, and then you can modify that later if you want to. All right, so now I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so I can see pretty well. And if you look, when I click on Launch Origin, you can see it's over here. And then here I am now in the game view. So I'm going to play to see what this looks like. And I click to launch balls, and you can see there we go, I've knocked over some of my balls. You can adjust your position of your launcher using the up and down or left and right arrows. You always launch at the same trajectory, but if you're moving while you're launching balls, you can launch them at different angles. So test how that works. If you like that velocity for your ball, you can also make your ball more bouncy and do all sorts of different things. And then save your scene by going to File, Save, or hitting Command S. So now you've done the basic elements for creating your ball launching game. You have your launcher that produces balls, you have a target here to hit, and so for the rest of this project, you're going to be doing your ball launching game just by customizing some of these features and adding additional features depending on what it is you want to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my boxes here that were my target, and I'm going to duplicate them so I have more. And then I'll adjust their position to be a bit different. I could adjust their rotation. Oops, not that one. I can adjust their rotation. I could duplicate this one, move it to the other side, and then I'll change my rotation. And there you go. Now I have two new targets that I can hit when I'm, excuse me, when I'm launching my balls. So you can make these things harder or to hit if you're changing their positions, if you're changing their angles, whatever it might be. You also can take our boxes here and duplicate and maybe make multiple examples of them. You could put them up in the air as long as you suspended their position. Whatever it is, build some more structures either from these or by creating other 3D game objects like, let's see, maybe a cylinder that would sit on the ground, some other kind of form like that. If you want to set it up so that your balls, when they hit the boxes here, destroy those balls, here's the walkthrough. I'm going to Assets, Prefabs, Ball, Add Component, Scripts, where's my scripts? Collision Controller, and now you can see I have my collision controller added to my ball prefab, and that's still open in my inspector window. In this here, check the box that says Destroy Enemy. Now I can select my cubes, click on one, shift click there, and then change their tags up here to enemy so that I know that these are what I want my ball to destroy. I'm going to do the same thing to my other cubes. And now when I go into play, and my ball hits the cubes, they're destroyed, meaning they're gone forever. And I'm not just knocking them over anymore. I'm actually going through and destroying them as if those were game objects. Well, they are game objects that I'm targeting. All right, saving there. You can also, if you want, change the push power for your ball prefab. So when your ball prefab selected, you can scroll down to that collision controller, and then push power here you can change. Oops. My push power was by default 1. I increased it to 2, and I was happy with that push power. In this case, the push power will not manifest if you have the destroy enemy on. If you turn that back off, and you're no longer destroying the boxes when you hit them, then when you launch, you're just pushing those boxes back. Now, if I want to do another specialty, and I'm going back to collision controller, I'm rechecking destroy enemy. Now for a little bit more complex thing, I'm going into my boxes here, the cube that's at the very top of my box here, in its inspector window, hang on. In its inspector window, I'm going to rigid body, and then my constraints here are going to be freezing my position on the X, Y, Z. And what that does is when I hit my cubes there and destroy the cubes on the bottom, the cube at the very top of my pyramid here remains in the air, and that makes it harder to hit. So you could potentially do floating boxes all throughout in here that don't move, and that you have to be very precise in your targeting of those boxes. All right, so something else I could do to customize my scene would be to add other objects that my ball will bounce off of, or I have to get around in order to hit my my stacks of boxes. So I could go into game object, 3D object, let's do a cylinder. And then you can see it's placed a cylinder between me and my boxes there. If I go into play, and I launch my balls, well, I'm in a good position now. Looks like maybe I need to make my object bigger to actually block, or taller. There, better illustration.